Hal put off, they had done remote viewing. And I'd actually looked at remote viewing too. And remote viewing was pretty clear in terms of remote viewing that they had, Hal Puthoff's wife had actually picked up on this. That when they were looking at the results of remote viewers, she basically stated that it appeared that this was right brain, left brain. That what the remote viewer was picking up very clearly was the shape of the object, the texture of the object, the smell, all these kind of things. But when it came to naming what the object was, the person wasn't very good at all. The person would miss the size, they would miss the name of the object. And that fits into the right brain, left brain. That the left brain is working in terms of words. The right brain is in terms of images. So the person was picking up the images. And that's why when they do the remote viewing, that's why they give the person just a number. They don't say this is a target in Egypt, because immediately the left brain, the rational analytical ego brain, is going to say, I know what it is. It's the king's chamber. It's and start guessing. And so that's why they would just give the person a name, because it was called analytical overlay. You didn't want to allow the left brain in there to influence the remote viewing, because once the left brain starts guessing, then it's over. And that's what they would say. Just write down what you're experiencing, what you're tasting, what you're smelling, what you're feeling. Just write this down and don't guess at what the object is, because you don't want to let the left brain in there. So I contacted Hal Puthoff at that point, and I said to Hal, Hal, did you guys ever look at right brain, left brain in terms of this contact modality, how people are tapping into this field? And he just wrote me back very simple. He said, read chapter 6 of my book, Mind Reach. And chapter 6 of Mind Reach is in one brain and out the other. And it was basically the right brain, left brain. That they already in 1972 had concluded that there was this right brain, left brain aspect of the thing. So I was extremely on the track then in terms of believing that this is the way it was. What has changed in this latest contact modality is I realized this whole thing about shutting down brain sections, where basically it's not lighting up brain sections. When you see these paranormal abilities taking place, you see brain sections becoming very, very quiet. And that indicates that you're doing this killing of the illusion, where the brain section is actually causing noise. And Ingo Swann actually described that. And Ingo Swann was the guy who came up with controlled remote viewing, that came up with the protocols that remote viewing is all done with now, the controlled coordinated remote viewing. And he stated that he talked about the noise factor, that when you have noise, you have inaccuracy. And that's what appears to be going on now, is that when you can quiet the brain, you quiet the noise, and you increase the signal. Everybody has access to the signal, and your brain is being created as a filter. It's blocking the vast majority of the reality around you. It's giving you assumptions about things that aren't really true, that the sun rotates around the earth, that the world is flat, that there's color, that things are solid, all these kind of things. It's giving you all these things, and when you can shut those sections of the brain that are causing the bubbles, then you can get into the reality. Now, one of the important things, and this was a quote from Roger Lear's book, where Roger Lear talked about what was common with all experiencers. He had done the implant removal, 17 implant removals, and he was asked what's common between all the people that you've done, and he said they're all right brain creative people, and all implants are on the left side of the body. And in his book, The Aliens and the Scalpel, he says this: following are other factors that were found to be significant in Daryl Sims' study of 250 alleged alien abduction cases. All objects were obtained from the left side of the body. A significant of other cases have been investigated that also show the suspect objects occurring in the left side of the bodies of the alleged abductees. This is extremely important, and it reinforces this whole idea that the left brain is the one that's creating the noise. It's keeping you in the physical world. It's doing its job here, but it's creating the noise. And when you can shut the left brain down, the right brain will tap in. It can tap into non-local consciousness, and it can read it. It can pull back material. Or even if you get with 40% of all experiencers who answered the question on the free survey said at one point during their experience, they knew the answer to everything in the universe. So the bottom line is that everything is out there. You can tap into it. You just have to be able to shut the left brain down. This significance of this 250 implants on the left side of the body is that the right brain runs the left side of the body and vice versa. So if the implants are going in the left side of the body, whoever's putting those implants in is not interested in the left rational analytical brain. It's interested in the right brain. That's why the implants are on the left side of the body. And that reinforces the fact that that may be how these people are able to tap in to be psychic, to be situations where a lot of experiencers will describe the fact that when the object is in the area, they know it's there. They know when they're going to get taken. They know that day. And these may be having to do with these implants, that it goes into the right brain, and this is tapping you into the universe and bypassing the left rational analytical brain. And so basically you have a situation where the brain is a radio or a TV, and as I maintain all the time, there is no football game inside the TV. No matter how much you want to think that all this stuff is happening inside the TV, there is none. And you can even go back 150 years and give a radio to Charles Darwin and a battery-operated radio, and he hears the London Philharmonic Orchestra playing. He's going to say that, how did you get that orchestra into the radio? And you'll say, no, it's not in the radio. And same as I would say today, no, consciousness is not in the brain. And you would say, yes, it is. It's quite clear. You can open the back of the radio and you can see stuff lighting up, and you can see this little gray thing, this little triangle gray thing that's vibrating. Every time the music starts, that thing vibrates. The orchestra has got to be inside that little gray thing, which we would now call a speaker. As much as you talk to people, they'll say there's these neurocorrelates that say this is happening, that's happening. But there's neurocorrelates inside a radio as well, and that doesn't mean that there's a football game inside the TV or an orchestra inside the radio. And what I would say, it's a matter of degrees. It's not like it's an off-on thing. When you get to these kind of things, it's how much you can shut it down. So you may be able to, like a dimming switch on a light switch. It would be that kind of thing where you can sort of shut it off 1/4, 1/3, and the more you can shut off whatever the part of the brain is that's causing the noise in the signal, the clearer the signal will be, and certain people will be able to do it better than others. So that's where Ingo Swann said noise equates to inaccuracy. And the more you can cut out the noise, the more accurate you will be. You can even get the false association, this idea where, you say, because I see something lighting up or see firefighters at a fire, that means they caused it. You can have someone sit and you can take a look at their brain pattern, and you're going to have a certain brain pattern. And at Laurentian University, they actually showed brain pattern of someone sitting still. And so the assumption would be, well, because those areas are lighting up, they're making you sit down. And that is where I say is another mistake that we make, is we believe that those things are making you sit down. No, you decided to sit down, and when you sat down, those parts of your brain lit up. It's you that's telling the brain what to do. And so you have situations where, for example, this oneness experience with meditators, or it's well known that the parietal lobe, that when a meditator does the meditation stuff, that the parietal lobe on the right side, it's very, very active. And when the meditation takes place, that area will quieten right down. Then the person has the oneness experience. So you cut out the sort of the bubble machine that's making you think that you're an ego, that you're separate, that you're just a random object floating around in time and space, and you suddenly realize everything's connected. You have separate objects, but everything's connected as one. That area becomes quietened down, but it doesn't mean that the quietening made you meditate. You need to meditate. I mean, the person decides he's going to meditate. It is the monk that is making the parietal lobe shut down. It's not the parietal lobe making the monk meditate. And people sort of have that backwards. And that's another thing we see, like in meditation, which is one of the contact modalities, is we see this situation where monks will create a very high gamma signal, and some of the highest signals ever seen in human beings. They'll start at 40 with these gamma, and trance channelers, the same thing. Trance channelers will be in at 40 to 50, very high gamma signal. So the idea is that the monk is doing the meditating, not the mind is making the monk meditate. When you see that kind of thing, you start to realize what's going on. And I even have I sometimes show people, I have a muse toy. I don't know many things in life, but I do have a muse, which is a meditation toy that you can put on your head. And basically, you turn it on, tap it into your cell phone, and you get feedback from your cell phone. And when you're creating theta signals, which is what you want in a meditation pattern, theta going up to the very, very edge of alpha, you will create a bird sound. And when you're off, when your mind is distracted, when you're thinking about something else, and you're up in 25 megahertz, somewhere in there, then you're going to get this very high rain noise. And the farther you're away from the theta signal, the more the rain is going to go. So when you're doing this thing, it is not the brain that's causing you to do the meditation or to change the signal. You can hear it, and as it's operating, you can hear its noise, and relax, go back to your breath, focus your mind, and it'll quieten down, and then it'll start to rain again. Then you have to go back, quieten down, move back, and then when the bird sound comes, then you get excited. Your mind starts to move, and then you suddenly lose the bird sound. So this is a thing where you can actually realize that it's you, the monk or whoever, that is actually making the sound of the rain or the quiet or the birds, and you can control it based upon how you think. And it's not the brain forcing you to do it. Now, with the parahippocampal gyrus, that was the work that was being done 10 years ago, they realized that when the person was psychic, this parahippocampal gyrus was lighting up, and when the person wasn't hitting, their left side, which would be your rational analytical side, your left interior frontal gyrus was lighting up. So they could actually tell just by looking at the brain scan whether the person was going to be accurate on the psychic prediction or whatever they were doing. And with Harabanz, you had this same thing where Harabanz would sit down with somebody, and he was reading the person. His brain signal and the signal of the person that he was reading would go into this, would start to synchronize. It would come out the same way with this Schumann's resonance thing, and it was known. And I think the Psychology Today article may get into this, because she didn't notice this. Was the report actually showed that when Harabanz held the target, the envelope in his left hand, he was more accurate than when he held it in his right hand, which again comes to this right brain, left brain type thing. And it was also done with meditation, with people who are doing meditation, as they realized that the people who did meditation were getting more sort of ESP type stuff, and that women got more, and women are more right-brained, and that left-handed women had the highest success ratio. And left-handed women, that would be left hand is run by the right brain. So you start to see these connections, and it's running across all these modalities. It's not just ESP, or it's just channeling or meditation. When you look at all these 75 modalities, I will absolutely maintain that almost every single one of them is controlled by disassociation. And the disassociation is shutting down the left brain. You dissociate. So you have situations, for example, a contact modality like a medium. There was a study done on Brazilian mediums that showed that the vast majority of them had childhood abuse issues. And I had even talked to some mediums about this, and they would confirm this same sort of thing. And what that is dissociation. So if you're a young child and you're being abused in some way, you're trying to shut out the world, you're trying to get rid of the world, and you dissociate. You cut off. The same as multiple personality people. who develop these multiple personalities, and a lot of these people experience all sorts of bizarre paranormal psychic abilities, abilities to speak other languages, stuff like this. It's the same thing. When you can shut off the world, you're disassociating from the left brain, and suddenly you're talking to your dead grandmother as a medium, or you have a separate altar that has been created, and that's the same thing. It's this disassociation. Now, a lot of what people will go back to is saying, well, it's a quantum field, or it's all explained physically. And I basically, in response to that, whether it's the quantum foam and these objects coming out of the quantum foam, you have a situation where, well, where does that come from? It still goes back to almost like Terence McKenna saying, give us all the quantum wave potentials, give us all the physical stuff, give us all the mass, all the energy, and we'll explain it from there. You still have to go back to where does the quantum, the holographic universe come from, and when you start looking at the people in quantum physics back in the day, you basically see them starting to describe the fact that consciousness is primary. Amit Goswami said consciousness does matter. Matter is secondary. Consciousness is primary. Brain does not do consciousness. Consciousness does the brain. Sir James Jeans said, I incline to the idealistic theory that consciousness is fundamental and that the material universe is a derivative from consciousness, not consciousness from the material universe. In general, the universe seems to me to be nearer to a great thought than to a great machine. It may well be, it seems to me, that each individual consciousness ought to be compared to a brain cell in the universal mind. And you had John Wheeler, who came up with the idea of black holes and wormholes, who said no phenomena is a physical phenomena until it's an observed phenomena. And this goes back to the dual slit experiment, which talks about the fact that when you have light going through two slits on a board onto a back wall, it will appear as a wave pattern. And so the idea would be that the light should be particles. It should make a particle pattern. It doesn't make a wave pattern. And that the minute they put the observer on, then that's when the particles sort of appear on the back wall, which to me still means that there is no particle on the back wall until there's an observer. The way we've sort of built the modern materialistic religious idea is that that matter, that all the particles on the back wall all gather together, and that they over billions of years create a random brain, and the brain creates the observer. In the dual slit experiment, the observer is first. There is no matter without the observer. And so I would say, as more and more people are coming to believe that consciousness is primary, there's even an organization that called Open Sciences, and it's a manifesto for a post-materialistic science. And there's a whole series of scientists who have now made this move and said, we have to move away from materialism, and we have to start looking at the importance of consciousness in the whole pattern. Now, as I only have about a couple of minutes left, let me just quickly go through and list the contact modalities for you. These are the ones I've come up with. You have meditation as a main one. You have a technique that's used by Tyler D., who is Tim Taylor, and I will describe that in Los Angeles. Hypnosis is one that we now know where you can tap, quiet the left brain. Inner vision process is one that's used. Yoga, prayer, shamanism. They have techniques for allowing people to dissociate. Psychedelics is a huge one in terms of dissociating. People dissociate immediately, but it's out of control. Hypnagogic state. Edison used that to do a lot of his inventions. hippopompic. I have used that as well. A lot of inventors use that. The Gansfield method. We have sometimes sex is actually, it's like a trauma type thing. Walking, I can use this. This is like a almost like a daydreaming, which is one where you sort of quiet the mind. A lot of inventions, the laser, the hologram, were invented in sort of a daydream state where they were sitting on park benches. Trance channeling, remote viewing, out-of-body experiences, dreams, psychic ability, people who have a natural psychic ability, which they have perfected, mediumship, dissociative identity disorder, chanting, automatic writing, breathing, telepathy. And telepathy, some of the ones with telepathy are extremely interesting. That shows how the brain section works. Rapid image cycling, I mentioned before. Koans, which is a new one that I learned. This is one that Tim Taylor was bringing up with Dan Pasolka. Then you have frequency things, music, drumming, binaural beats. You have force disassociations. This is where the trauma thing comes in. You have people with head injuries. You have people with extremely bad marriages, abuse, epilepsy. A lot of psychic stuff happens with people who have epilepsy, synesthesia, dissociative identity disorder, alien abduction, pain, fever, fasting, vegetarianism, lack of sleep, sensory deprivation, brain injury, brain disease, things that happen around death. You have people who are able to sort of disassociate and see loved ones coming to get them. You have near-death experiences. You have people predicting their own death. You have all sorts of seances. Then you have all sorts of messaging type things where there's direct contact with aliens. Crop circles are a contact modality. Synchronicities, radio, phone, infrared, television. And then you have all sorts of tools. There's an instrument that was created at Laurentian University called the octopus. There's Ouija boards, and I've got some interesting stories about that. Brain stimulation, where you magnetically stimulate the left brain, shut it down. You can create savant abilities, ESP abilities, tape recordings, sigils, dowsing, crystal balls, and necromancy, mental projections, all sorts of ghost probes, tea leaves, all this kind of stuff. And these are things that are used for tools. So these are the things that I'm going to sort of go through, and I will eventually put this all in a book and go into great detail with each. They all have the same underlying disassociation or trauma that's involved with it. And if we can learn to do this, we can learn to tap into the field and get material out of the field, which we can use to make a better world. So that's what I'm talking about next weekend in Los Angeles at Consciousness Life Expo. I will be going into a little more detail than what I did tonight. So thanks for listening.
You've been listening to The Cameron Files with Grant Cameron. Any rebroadcast or duplication of this program or program content without express written permission from Grant Cameron himself or the KGRA DB is strictly prohibited. The Cameron Files, in direct cooperation with the internet website BeyondPresidentialUFO.com.